extremely high. And why is that? Why is Europe unable to do the same thing that the US are able to do? And this has very much to do with our idea about economics, and this idea about economics has very much to do with development. You see, what happened in the US always followed a very pragmatic economic policy. They were very aggressive in terms of their monetary policy in the last 5 years, much more aggressive than Europe in the first round. They followed a quite aggressive fiscal policy, and that explains why they brought down unemployment quite nicely in the last 5 years, despite the fact that they didn't have a very strong recovery. The US recovery was weaker than all the recoveries before the last 40, 50 years. But Europe failed even in that respect dramatically. And here comes the question, why is Europe unable to do the same thing? And if you look recently at Europe, you see that in some countries like Italy and France, so big countries, not Greece, but Italy and France, we have still unemployment rates that are close to 10%. And this 7 years after the recession, or even more. 10 years after recession, we have still unemployment rates of more than 10%, and you see overall Europe, it is still something close to 9%. And this is due to a certain dogmatic approach in economics that I will explain in a minute. So you see, if you compare unemployment in Europe and the US, you see Europe is doing much worse even after the last crisis, where the unemployment rate was exactly the same in 2009, but then the US brought the unemployment rate down while Europe was unable to do so. The point that we have to understand is a very crucial one. Namely, the point is, where does deflation come from? I mentioned already we have deflationary wage policies. And that is very important to understand. And this is true for developing countries as well as for developed countries. It's absolutely the same. We did some research in UNCTAD, and the evidence is everywhere the same. Namely, the point is, deflation is determined by wages. You see, there was an inflation also. So the price developments are very much determined by wages, which is a clear contradiction to what we call monetarism. You know, there was the idea some 30 years ago that you would the central bank would steer a certain amount of money, and this amount of money, this money supply, as it was called, this money supply would determine the inflation rate very nicely. This theory is wrong. And today, this is the funny thing, today, all central banks in the world have totally abandoned monetarism. They have totally abandoned monetarism because it is clear that there is no money supply that would determine the inflation rate or a deflation rate. The opposite is true, namely, what happened is we have unit labor costs, that is the nominal wage in relation to the productivity, unit labor costs that are determining inflation and deflation. You see the example of Japan. In Japan for 25 years now we have a deflationary situation, and it's clearly associated with the wage development. If you take the United States, it's exactly the same. If you take Europe, it's exactly the same. There's always a very close association of unit labor costs to inflation. And this, as I said, is true for developing countries also. But this has a very important implication, a dramatically important implication, because it means if it is true that wages determine inflation, wages cannot determine unemployment at the same time. This is logically impossible. Because if nominal wages fall and prices follow, so that the real wage does not change very much, which is the implication of this evidence, and I show it to you. This is first the interest rate, but if you look, wait, oh, I have to go in that direction, sorry. Come on. Here. This is a more general evidence for inflation and unit labor costs. Over many years, from 70 to 2013, so over a very long time span, the correlation is extremely strong. it's extremely strong, and as I said, it's true for developing as well as developed economies, which means that we have to give up some of our ideas, or the main idea that is characterizing neoclassical economics, which is that the labor market is cleared by wages. If wages determine, as I said, if wages determine inflation, they cannot determine unemployment. This is impossible for logical reasons. So if it is true that monetarism does not exist and wages determine inflation, then we have to change our whole idea about economics dramatically. Because then it means, and I'll try to go back. Oh, come on. Because it means that we're getting into a situation. Come on. That we're getting into a situation, as we have seen as I said, in the last years, namely that the central bank is forced to fight unemployment. Because if wages cannot fight unemployment, who is going to fight unemployment? And it's absolutely clear that it has to be done by the central bank. So, but if the central bank fights unemployment, you need an arrangement for wages. You need an arrangement for wages, an arrangement that leads to a certain outcome that is logically, again, absolutely unavoidable, which means that if unit labor costs determine the inflation rate and you have a certain inflation target, the implication is, and now all countries of the world have inflation targets, if you have a certain inflation target, you need economic policies that at least determine or influence wages in a way that they are growing in line with the inflation target. So you need a new set of policy instrument, which is former times, very long time ago, was called incomes policies, or kind of social partnership, or what kind of policies that can influence wages in a way that they are, and that is very important, that they are determining inflation. But if they determine inflation, then it is absolutely clear if unit labor costs, so nominal wages minus productivity, so to say, determine inflation, then it's absolutely clear that the real wage has to increase all the time like productivity increase. That's very crucial. And many people do not understand it. It is absolutely crucial for our economies to function that real wages increase in line with productivity increase. And there is no way to change it without creating unemployment. You know what I'm saying? I'm saying exactly the opposite of what is the traditional view. The traditional view is, if you want to reduce unemployment, you have to cut wages. You have to have real wages lagging behind productivity. That can be the only way to success in terms of cutting unemployment. And I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying, no, the only way to be successful on unemployment is to have real wages always following productivity exactly. See, this is very crucial, and if you look around in the developing world, you will find that very few countries in this world have arrangements for this to happen. Very few countries in the world. But I can give you some examples. The best example in the last 20 years for doing that is China. China is the country where the government permanently induces wage increases that are even going beyond the real wages just matching the productivity increase. But China is the example, and Japan 30 years ago, and Korea also 30 years ago. These are examples of countries where they managed in one way or the other, against the neoclassical idea, to get the participation of the workers in the productivity increase. And this participation is extremely crucial to be successful. Why it is crucial to be successful? Not just for social reasons. Oh, it is nice that people have more money. No, it's for economic reasons. And the economic reason is very simple. Because the people who are working hard to get something out of the country, are producing products in the country, they have to have the power to buy the products that they are producing. They have to have the power to buy their products, the products that they have produced. If you give them less, what then? Then you have produced too much. Then you produce unemployment. You produce unemployment by giving people too low wages, wage increases. I do not say that this is the truth, you see, but I say we have very strong evidence for that. But you should think about it. If you think about the developing country or developed country, you have to question the neoliberal or neoclassical dogma of flexible wages. This is questioning the dogma of flexible wages. Because the evidence that we have for the Western world shows that flexible wages are not successful. And then comes, this is, for example, the increase in productivity. We have very low productivity growth with the slowdown of wages, with the pressure on the wage share. I do not want to go further into that. I want to show you the country that seems to contradict what I'm saying. And this country is my own country. Because there's one country in Europe that is more successful in terms of unemployment than other countries. You see, this is the unemployment rate for Europe, split up into Italy, France, Europe as a whole, the European Monetary Union, and Germany. And there's one country that seems to be successful. And again comes the conclusion, oh, why? Why is Germany successful? Well, because Germany put pressure on its wages. Isn't Germany, the people are saying, isn't Germany the model for the neoclassical, so to say, the role model for the neoclassical theory, namely that putting pressure on wages makes you successful in terms of cutting unemployment? And the answer is no, it's not a proof that the neoclassical theory is right. Because what happened in Germany, indeed, in Germany, in Germany, real wages were lagging behind productivity. See, this is the green line is the real wages. The red line is productivity. And you see, beginning with the years 2000, Germany put enormous political pressure on wages to lag behind productivity. And they were successful. The political pressure was successful. German real wages did not rise as much as productivity. Compare that with France, and you see in France real wages did increase like productivity, but the result was, you saw it before, unemployment is high in France and low in Germany. And that is taken as being the proof that my thesis is wrong and neoclassical economics is right. But this is wrong again. So what happened really in Europe? Let me show you this. This chart is another interesting chart just for a moment. This is Greece, you see. The conclusion from the German success was in Europe, put pressure on wages everywhere, in the crisis countries in particular, and then these countries will be successful. And you see in Greece what happened is the real wage per hour is the green line. It's in absolute terms and in euros on the right-hand scale. And you see in Greece the wages dropped by something like 25-30%. The real wage dropped by 25 to 30%. And the result was, did unemployment come down? No, unemployment went up. And this is the paradox. In Germany it was successful, in Greece not. And what is the reason for that? And it's very important to understand it, because if you don't understand this, then you will never get the problem right. And the indication of what happened is the current account. As this chart says, trade explains the German miracle. Because what happened in Germany, it was not the real wage lagging behind. This is, you see, the current account surpluses in the world, and you see Germany is one of the top performers. What happened in Germany, this is the beginning, since the beginning of the currency union, the real wages were lagging behind productivity, but at the same time, And this is, again, the unit labor costs. Well, the unit labor costs were lagging behind the other partners. In Germany, unit labor costs did not increase as much in the other countries, and it did not increase as much as was foreseen by the ECB, by the European Central Bank, in its inflation target. You see, the inflation target was 1.9%, the black line. And some countries were overshooting the inflation target, like Greece and Italy. But Germany was undershooting it dramatically. So Germany, in the first years of the monetary union, reduced its nominal wages. The important thing was not that real wages were lagging behind productivity, but the important thing was that nominal wages were, and unit labor costs were lagging behind the other partners, and there was no exchange rate anymore. In former times, if Germany would have been more competitive than Italy, what would have happened? Well, the Italian lira would have depreciated. But there is no lira anymore that can be depreciated. And if there is no lira, Germany gains and accumulates a competitive advantage against the other countries that is huge. Because this chart can be, oh, sorry, no, it never works in the way I wanted to do it. No, forget about it. Because this chart can be read in a very simple way. If at the beginning of the currency union in 1999, if most of the products in these countries and all the countries in Europe, this is the red line, is monetary union without Germany. Sorry, I didn't explain it. The red line is monetary union without Germany, and Germany is below. I can show it to you in a different way. We have here France and Italy. You see, Italy was above the other countries, and what this curve means is that products that had, say, more or less the same price in 1999 in Europe, let's say 100